Welcome back to another video. So it's that time of year again, mid to late May, in this zone 6A climate where we are getting out there and planting our gardens. Many of our warm season crops are going in the ground at this point in time, and so today I want to talk about another companion planting experiment that I have going on, and just to kind of share some notes on that and document the process and the ideas that I have surrounding this experiment. So as a backyard gardener, or even as a small farmer or a market gardener, you always want to maximize your space efficiency as much as possible. And companion planting can be a great way to accomplish this, right? You can combine multiple plants together and hopefully get the benefits where these plants are helping each other to grow while producing a bountiful yield that you can glean for the harvest. A common companion planting that many of us are familiar with is the corn, beans, and squash. And this companion planting method originated down in the Central America area, I believe, where the corn was used as a trellis for the beans. The beans helped to supply some nitrogen and were able to vine up the corn, and the squash kind of helped act as a ground cover to create a more habitable environment for the corn, beans, and squash. And of course, that's a very basic general overview. There was a lot more to it than just that. But you have these three plants that were working together, and you're able to maximize yield efficiency that much more, rather than just growing a plot of corn there or only squash. So essentially what I'm doing in this bed is I'm companion planting as an experiment the following plants together: sorghum, cucumbers, green beans, gladiolas, and I think that's actually it. I was going to add okra in there, but I didn't want the space to get too cramped. So I'm just sticking with this plot right now for this particular garden bed. And so these plants weren't just chosen randomly. The theory that I've developed behind this is essentially that the sorghum will act as a living support for the gladiolas, right? The gladiolas can when they begin to flower, they can begin to lean to one side, and especially if you are harvesting gladiolas for market or to sell, you want the straightest stalks you can possibly get. So essentially what I'm doing is I am planting the gladiolas down the center row of this bed, and I'm staggering that with the cucumbers and the sorghum, right? So the sorghum can act as that living trellis. Maybe I'll use some type of string, weave those in through the gladiolas to act as additional support, to really bolster that supporting effect. And then the cucumber is planted in between those plants to act as a ground cover to protect the ground and to add a layer of food production on that surface ground level. The sorghum is also fairly tolerant of growing in poor soil, which I have a lot of around here. And it may also act in some ways to really help to aerate the soil with its root system and to really kind of feed some of that life in the soil, potentially sequestering a lot of carbon from its root exudates, and that carbon is then feasted upon by a lot of that soil life, boosting the health of the soil, which in turn helps to boost the health of the plants growing around it. And then on either side of the center row, I have beans planted. So these beans can be, they can help facilitate the process of nitrogen fixation. A lot of that nitrogen can get used for themselves though, right? Because they need to be able to create that high protein seed. And in order to do so, they need a fair amount of nitrogen, right? Because nitrogen is one of the primary building blocks of amino acids or proteins, right? And beans are of course a high source of protein, so they need that nitrogen. That's why they've kind of evolved over time to be able to form these symbiotic relationships with certain microbes in the soil, so they can get more of that nitrogen that they need. Now, if I were to let the beans grow and develop some of the nodules and then cut them down, but left the roots in the soil, that would actually make that nitrogen more available to the other plants around it. However, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to let the beans grow, and I can at least know that maybe some of the nitrogen that they produce can be used to help the other plants grow as well. Maybe not a lot or as much as what I'd like, but these bean plants are still feeding the soil life, and I know that they're not just extracting nitrogen from the ground, but they're actually kind of being self-sufficient in that way, and they're not taking so much away from the other plants. Yeah, and then with the gladiolas, when I'm planting these gladiolas, I am also experimenting with adding in some compost in half of this row. In the first half of the row, there's no compost applied. It's only the gladiolas in the soil, but in the other half, I put first in a little bit of compost, and then I put the gladiola bulb on top of that, and then I cover that with soil. Corm, I mean, not bulb. If we want to get into technicalities. But this compost, I just want to see how much it affects or impacts the gladiola growth to see if it's really necessary or worth it in this case. But it can help kind of kickstart some nutrients in the soil, some soil life as well with these microbes, you know, and such things like that. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'm gonna wrap this up here. It might thunderstorm shortly, but I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something from it, and I look forward to seeing you in a future video. Take care. And so this is about a week later, and of course we can see some of these plants beginning to emerge, like this cucumber seedling right here. But this is the first day that I've noticed any of these seeds coming up, so it'll probably take a few more days. We had a pretty good rain yesterday, and we might get a pretty good rain today too. We'll see how that goes. But here's a bean coming up, bean sprout. So these seeds are beginning to wake up.